In this video I try to answer the question if the 80s Filmation He-Man is gay-coded. Over a week ago I saw Professor Geek's video He-Man is not gay-coded, where he states correctly that the word fabulous is not gay-coded. This is true, especially in this context. Also, I would like to address the colors of purple or purpura and pink of Adam's clothing, and his haircut that may be interpreted as gay signs or signals. I talk here only about the Filmation Prince Adam's colors, and not DC from Eternia with Death comics that featured Prince Adam for the first time with a blue and dark red coloration. First, the haircut. In modern times, this haircut is called the bob cut, but it goes way back in history. In ancient Egypt it was worn by both men and women. In medieval England it was worn by pages and squires that were serving, learning courtly things, and the knighthood. Therefore the haircut was also known as garçon cut, which means boy cut, and because the long hair was often reserved for the grown-up noblemen and knights in many societies, this cut was a step towards the later acquired manhood. So how comes that Prince Adam He-Man has this haircut? This is probably due to the popularity of Hal Forster's Prince Valiant, that is about the adventures of Prince Val from Thule. It also made this haircut popular in the 50s and 60s. I will also add that Conan in the Marvel Comics series from the 70s has often the same haircut as Prince Val, and since Conan is the inspiration for He-Man, so it is probable that this was the direct path. Second, the color pink. Today we are used to the ascription of color blue for boys and pink for girls, but this is just a recent thing. Even the Time magazine had still in 1927 the recommendation for boys pink and blue for girls, so the change did not occur up to the mid of late 40s. But this change didn't happen simultaneously all over the world, and it could have occurred much later in some regions, even up to the 70s. Blue is a Navy, sailor and workers color, and perhaps this was the reason for the change, especially since in the Second World War there was a great emphasis on the US Navy. But even in the late 19th century and early to mid 20th century we see boys as a fashion being put into little sailor uniforms. To add to this thought is that pink was also not always seen as a distinct color from red. And red was a color of the military, like the famous English redcoats, Spartans, Roman legionary or the Polish winged hussars. But the two later groups have often also used other colors as well. Many of the creative forces behind He-Man and the Masters of the Universe were already in their 40s and 50s, like Louis Scheimer, so they could have still used the pink color for the boys. Therefore the haircut, together with the color pink, is double coding the aspect of Adam being a boy, since it was the intention to portray him as a 16-year-old teenager. Naturally, to keep the costs low and not to confuse the children and parents, the same model was used for He-Man and Adam. And when Adam changes himself to He-Man by raising his sword and saying, "I have the power," which represents the conscious recognition of one's own agency, he loses the boyish aspect and becomes a full-grown man that is reminiscent of Prince Val in his problem-solving ability. Third, the color purple. The word purple derives from the word purpura, and this is a Latinization from the Greek porphyra. And purple is a color of magistrates, emperors, kings, princes, professors and Catholic bishops. And this is because in antiquity and medieval times this color could have been only made from the water snail Bolinus brandaris, and was called the Tyrian purple, where Tyrian refers to the city of Tyre in Lebanon. And while the snails were farmed, you still needed around 12,000 snails that amount to around 50 kilos for just 1 gram of dye. With 1 gram you can dye around 10 to 15 grams of fabric. So it was quite time intensive to make this color, and this made this dye very expensive, and therefore clothing dyed by Tyrian purple was a status symbol. Today this dye can be bought for around $3,000 per gram, and you will need around 100 grams to dye a trouser. But nowadays we can dye with a mix of different dyes to the same color like the Tyrian purple, and therefore the color has lost its meaning and the value as the status symbol. It is self-explanatory that the design of Prince Adam had also more to do with the composition and perception of colors in the 80s than probably this symbolism. But one can never know unless the one who is responsible talks about this. And alone the choice of just one color has limited the possible choices from the 3 other colors. And the choice to use 4 colors and not 2 or 3 is also an aesthetic preference. Pink could have been used to offset the darkening purple and violet, or the other way around. The person who designs such a figure must in the end look at different colored figures and decide what works and what doesn't, on the different backgrounds in the light and shadow. And there is also the range of TVs and their luminosity. By the way, anyone who has lived in the 80s or has even watched Miami Vice knows that in the 80s pink, white, purple and violet were nothing unusual for men. Last but not least, the word fabulous. In common understanding, fabulous means something more similar to grandiose, great or awesome, but its previous and true meaning is more from a fable or like in a fable. And a fable is a short story written in prose or verse form that is sometimes satirical, but it has an educational moral lesson revealed at the end as a maxim or saying. And it differs from the parable by anthropomorphic personified animals, plants, forces or legendary creatures. The fable is one of the oldest forms of storytelling found all around the world and is dating back to at least 1000 to 500 BC. Further, I would like to add that the word fable comes from the biblical translation made from the word mythos. Therefore, one could also state that He-Man receives mythical powers and secrets, akin those to Hercules. Naturally, He-Man and the Masters of the Universe is not a true fable, since it contains also elements from other forms of storytelling, but it still contains all the fable elements and therefore is a mixed form. Based on the structure of the fable, the fabulous secrets can also be interpreted as the moral of the stories that is revealed to boys watching the series to make them better men. If there is a gay coding contained in He-Man, then it is not found in this symbolism. But naturally I have not much knowledge about gay symbolism in the US of the 80s. Any symbolism can be region, place, fashion and time dependent, but I think that as long as Adam, He-Man, is not wearing brown or a yellow scarf, bandana or tissue, we can confidently say that at least he is not gay coded. The character Fisto, due to his name, is naturally a strong argument for gay coding, but this is superficial. Fisto's toy appeared earlier than the first episode featuring Fisto named Fisto's Forest. This is due to the fact that Fisto was created according to Martin Ariola by Mattel's designer Colin Bailey and not by Filmation, like in the case of Prince Adam's look. So, Ariola should know more about Fisto and gay coding than anyone else, because Colin Bailey was working with him. And according to Ariola, he was already in his 60s as he started at Mattel in 1982. And due to his progressed age, we can exclude him from participation in the 80s Los Angeles gay scene. Also to note is that the name Fisto was used in the 80s and 90s, but due to his gay attribution, his name was changed to Battlefist for the 2000 X series. Nevertheless, Motu fans will always call him Fisto and laugh about the memes, since he is a popular toy figure. And since Mattel owns the trademark for Fisto according to Spector Creative, his name is secured. To summarize the entire video, one can state that as long as one cannot point to specific code elements and their previous appearance in the Los Angeles gay scene of the 70s to mid-80s and stating that Motu is gay coded is only projecting personal sexuality on the franchise and by this damaging it. Let me end this video with a famous Motu reference. Fight to the death! but don't hurt anybody.